The following was recorded at the CCHF Conference 2023 in Cincinnati.
Well, we will get started, and thank you, and is this a little loud? It's great to have you all. Yesterday, my little speaker thing in the app said 4 people, so clearly we have a lot more than 4. And I want to start by thanking our panelists, who we kind of talked about this last summer, and then I reminded them this morning. Their remarks are going to be genuine and authentic and very unrehearsed, and they're going to do great. And I promise to help them do great, but they don't even need me to do that because they're great leaders in their own right. So we will have them introduce themselves in a bit. Just a little bit about the session. We're going to spend the next hour together. Hi, Dr. Katie, is that you back there? No, it's not. I don't have my glasses on, so I need people to sit up front closer to see you. Very quickly, as a way to get us all going, I'm going to ask you to text me a picture of your shoes. So, and to prove that I wouldn't ask you to do anything I do, there's my shoes on that side. And then these shoes here are Jason, our audiovisual guy, who is helping me get set up in the beginning. And some of you already have. And we're going to talk about the different shoes that these 4 leaders stepped into when they became CEOs for the first time or CEOs again in a clinic. And if one thing I learned last year at this conference more than others, people really share and are really personal. So I brought my dog Cora with me to tell you I'm not kidding. I really do want some pictures of your shoes so we can talk about the different shoes of leadership. So as we go through the day and the session, and as you hear our 4 panelists talk, we might ask you what role you're in. Do you want to lead at what level? All of these 4 are current CEOs of your sister clinics, and are going to share their experiences with you. So a lot of times when people come into a leadership role, they're not quite sure what they're getting into. It's a new role, it's fun, and we do have some people that are going to step in with their flip-flops thinking it's going to be a little comfortable, it's going to be easy, maybe a walk on the beach, and they're not quite sure what tidal waves may hit them yet. We have other leaders that may come in with their scrub, what are these called? The medical scrub shoes? Are they Crocs in clinics as well? Okay, so they're coming in with their clinic Crocs and, kind of casually making the transition. We have other people that are coming in sometimes from outside of our clinics, and they're, coming in spiffy shoes, as my kids call them, and, a little bit dressed up, a little heels. Sometimes people are going to come in with glitter and glam, and I don't think, Jocelyn, you wore these shoes. I know you can't see them there, but rhinestone 4-inch heels. I don't think you wore those on your first day. Then there's some people that need to come in with some heavy-duty gear. There's changes that need to be made. There's a lot of work that has to be done, so you need those work boots. And then I think some of our friends probably come in with their tennies and their basketball shoes and what they're playing with to help guide their steps. And regardless of which shoes you wear, your shoes have to carry you in your faith. And so we need to make sure that's regardless of your heels or your work boots or your spiffy shoes, you want to make sure that those shoes are carrying you in your faith. And that's why we're all here today. That's why we're all here together learning, sharing knowledge, and being a part of group learning and group togetherness. So we are going to start down on that end, and I'm going to let Jocelyn introduce herself. This is a little bit about Jocelyn, where she's at, and she is the Chief Executive Officer of Covenant Community Care. So give us a couple seconds about you as CEO and what Covenant is and does in Detroit.
My name is Jocelyn Cutway, and I'm the CEO of Covenant Community Care in Detroit. We're a federally qualified health center. And we actually will, at the end of this year, have 3 sites, and all of them have medical and behavioral health and dental. We serve 20,000 patients, and we've got about 160 employees.
And Jocelyn, you began in 2013, correct?
I started in 2013 as a grant writer. I became acting CEO in the fall of 2019, and then became permanent CEO in July of 2020.
Okay, great. Our next panelist, James Brooks. I think many of you know him, but James, introduce yourself and Lawndale.
Hey, I'm James Brooks, serve at Lawndale Christian Health Center, and we want the Lawndale community of Chicago on the west side of Chicago. A little bit about us. mission is to show and share the love of Jesus by promoting wellness and providing quality and affordable health care for Lawndale and the neighboring communities. We have about 680 staff on 5 sites. We have Green Tomato Cafe and a fitness center, so other lines other than just health care. Well, that's all part of health care, so, yeah.
And you started in 2013. Tell us what your role was.
As the Director of Spiritual Care, I come to this with a unique credentialing set. I'm an MDiv, I'm not an MPH or an MD. I'm an MDiv, D-Min, and so I bring a pastoral lens to my leadership.
Great. Okay. Next we have Daniel Liparelli, and Daniel's with Neighbor Health.
Great. My name is Daniel Liparelli. I'm the CEO of Neighbor Health Center. I've been in that position for 14 months. My background has been in nonprofits. I've been doing nonprofit leadership for about 20 years. Before coming to Neighbor Health, I had almost no experience in healthcare, but I love serving people and I love leading people in the organizations. Neighbor Health is a federally qualified health care lookalike. We've got about 7,000 patients and 1 site, and we're 4.5 years old, so we've grown really quickly.
Okay. And lastly, we have Don Barnum, or Branham, I'm sorry. I keep saying it wrong.
Good afternoon, my name is Don Branham. I'm the CEO at Christ Community Health in Augusta, Georgia. Been there for about 2.5 years. We've got about 120 employees, 4 locations, medical, dental, integrated behavioral health, CCM, full gamut of care that you can imagine. My background, I've been in healthcare most of my career. God pulled me out of that for 8 years, where I was in the executive coordination development, actually in the church. That kind of prepared me before I was to get into Christian healthcare leadership before I did. And so I've been CEO, CFO, COO of health centers, so I've got a pretty good handle on that.
Okay, great. So this is going to be the group's opportunity to learn from our 4 panelists. And I'm going to start it off by saying that a lot of times when people say, I want to be a leader of something, they've got the image on the left, that very nice, clean, I can't see if I can turn that a little bit for you guys to see that. And then I'm not going to ask you if your first week felt like this, but we're going to start it off that it's okay and to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the neutral of being a leader, because that's all part of it. If any leader has solid days, weeks, years like that, maybe it's not quite working out the way it should, and it should also never be solid days, weeks, years like that. So there's a healthy balance somewhere in between, and we're going to learn from these 4 what that is. So we have questions prompted in case the group doesn't have any. My experience at CCHF events, there's never a shortage of questions. So I'm just going to open it up right now for some questions. What do you want to hear from our panelists about being a leader in a CCHF member organization?
What keeps you up at night?
What keeps you up at night? Let's see, I'm going to go with Jocelyn first, because you've been in a clinic the longest in the role. We'll do some of it that way. So what keeps you up at night, Jocelyn?
Senior citizen as a CEO of 3 years in. And that's really the answer, is because at CEO, you have to hold the whole picture. So sometimes it might be a financial thing, and sometimes it might be operational, and sometimes it might be a clinic that doesn't have staff. It can just be things that just ping through your mind when I would lay down, and all of the different details of covenant would just start to run through my head. And probably one of the things I would say is I started realizing that it's not healthy to lay down at night and replay every aspect of the day. And so I have to figure out almost like my time routine so that when I lay down, it's not everything that goes through covenant. It runs the gamut, because you really do hold the whole perspective of the organization, board requests, staff requests, your own thoughts. And so it just rapid fire.
Okay. I think, Don, you're somewhere in the same range as Jocelyn, so.
Honestly, nothing. I really am able to leave it behind. And through doing this kind of stuff for almost 30 years, I've learned to set it aside and learned how to do that. Now, the counter to that is I don't sleep much. That's just who I've always been. I'm usually up around 4 and kind of going and just I love what I do, and so I'm passionate, and I usually will lay in bed till about 4:30, kind of wake my wife up. I'm just like, let's get going. And so I think part of that is just I've learned to have a routine, I've learned to delegate, and then just empower. I can't do it all, and if I do, we're going to fail as an organization. I got to give it to God, and that's most of my morning, an hour and a half is just praying for the clinic, praying for the team. And if they can be equipped and I can help them do their job well, I shouldn't have breakfast times. And so again, it's probably a little bit different counter to most people, and I get that question quite a bit. And again, you just gotta know that I can't do it all, and if I do, I'm failing. And God has equipped me to do what He called me to do. He's equipped everyone else on our team to do what they do, and I've got to empower them to do that.
I've got to follow up on exactly what Don said, because I've spent so many years of my life worrying, and the results didn't change. I just wasted time and lost sleep and had unhealthy outcomes from worrying. But what I've learned through my years of leadership is that at the end of the day, I feel my role with Neighbor Health Center, I feel like God brought me to that position. And when I look at the organization, it's not my organization, it's the Lord's organization. He has just brought me to be a steward of it. And so the outcomes of it, good or bad, are in His control at all times. And so his call on me is to be trustworthy and obedient and to walk in faith. And so, when we go through hard times, I really sit with my leadership team and say, hey, you know what, I know that this is, our finances last month were not what we were looking for. And, we're going to have a board meeting next month, and we're going to have to report to them why we were so off in that month. But guess what? The Lord is in control, and He has us in His hands, and He doesn't want us to worry about this. He wants us to make wise decisions and to approach our leadership with strategy and discussion, but there's nowhere that we're supposed to lay awake at night worrying about these things. And so really, there's things that does not mean I don't have anxiety and I don't have stress by any means. That exists, but I've really learned, like Donna shared at the end of the day, to say, Lord, this is yours. Carry this. And there's enough problems today, and tomorrow I'll deal with those problems tomorrow.
For me, like I said, I classify myself as a shepherding CEO. Often what consumes my thoughts is just the wellness of our staff. I want to make sure that they're well. Like I said, we have about 680 employees. Majority of them are from the community where I was born and raised and currently live. So when I'm asleep at night, sometimes I'm hearing gunshots or whatever is going on in our community, constant sirens. And I'm thinking about my staff because I know that there's a great possibility either our staff are directly impacted by what I'm hearing or they're indirectly impacted. So just always, I can't help it, but I'm just kind of wired like that. Just think about staff wellness. How are people doing, especially those, my neighbors? How do I live well and they're struggling to keep the lights on? I'm challenged by that sometimes. Make sense out of it. So I want to do my part and be in the hands and feet of the Lord.
Thank you. Okay, another question.
One of my questions is, or struggles, is that we are smallish, mid-size, and we just don't have staff to delegate to. So would you speak to prioritizing how you go through that process? Because sometimes you want to hand it off, and there's no one, you're like looking behind you, there's no one to pass it to. So could you speak a little bit to prioritizing and delegating in a resource-constrained environment?
So let me repeat the question for the recording and from Grace Clinic is that right? Grace in Kennewick, Washington. So we are a small mid-sized clinic. We don't have the staff to delegate to. So how do you prioritize in a resource-constrained environment? Okay, largest staff is probably James, you, right? So you have the staff to delegate. Smallest staff would probably be Daniel? Yes? Okay, so why don't you start with that, and then let's just have a quick comment from everyone. So Daniel, yep, smallest staff first. Sorry, yeah.
So we really, one thing that I do is really figure out what we can't do and make that clear. Sometimes the board will come and say, hey, we'd like you guys to do these things. And so I make sure that we're not overcommitting ourselves and teaching myself and my staff that it's okay to say no. And it's really important that we do what we do with excellence rather than spreading ourselves too thin and not being able to do good at any of the areas. And so there's just simply things we can't do because we're under-resourced, and we make that clear and say, hey, we don't have the staff enough, we just can't do that, and be okay with it.
Don or Jocelyn, I don't know staff sizes on you two.
We're about 160 employees, and I've got a great team, but we struggled with burnout for that exact reason. We had so much going on, and so I cannot remember who said it, but it's not my quote. But it's one of my favorite ones, and it's intentional disregard is every bit as important as conscientious concentration. And I heard that in a speech once, and I took that and ran with it, that there are times you have to intentionally disregard exactly what you're saying. So as long as you communicate what you're setting to the side for a while to everybody, so an example would be, and she said it was okay for me to share about it, but our CFO just took an 8-week leave of absence, and she needed it. And so when she first said it, I thought, I don't know what's going to happen here. We were in the middle of a payroll transition. But you take a step back, and I knew I needed to get her some time away. And so I told our board treasurer and got everybody on board. This is what's going to be happening for the next 8 weeks. This is what has to happen. Payroll has to happen. Checks have to be signed. These are the things that you would normally see from us that won't happen. And as long as everybody knew at the outset what was and wasn't going to happen over those 8 weeks, it actually went great. She came back refreshed, and she's doing very well. So we had to really intentionally disregard some things and concentrate on the really important ones. So,
okay, Don?
It's the conscientious concentration part that is like a tongue twister. But intentional disregard is every bit as important as conscientious concentration. And I just like it because you would think that what we concentrate on is the only important thing. But you also have to say, okay, what am I not doing and how am I communicating that I'm not able to do that right now? And as you once you balance both, it really helps you with prioritization.
Don?
So even larger organizations, we have that same problem. And so right now where I'm at, we don't have a director of operations, so I do that as well. And then we just transitioned out our chief financial officer, so I'm doing that as well. So busy, but what we did, I met with our entire accounting and finance team. And we talked. I said, okay, what are the priorities? What do you guys find important? And I just listened to them all, and then we came up as a group looking at, number one, what are easy wins? Because you want to get the team believing in themselves, and that gets momentum. So we found little easy wins. We started ticking off a couple of those. And then with that, they started to get, okay, I can do this. They started to get confidence. Then you figure out who starts to rise up a little bit, and then you empower them a little more. And people will rise in those types of challenges. And then as others have shared, you just kind of as a group say, that's just going to wait. Sorry, you know what? There's balls and there's eggs. Balls will bounce, the eggs don't. And so we just talked about that. The guys, will this bounce or not? And we wrestled through that, and we decided, no, that's an egg. All right, so that goes back here. And you just have that conversation. If everyone's on the same team, you can get there. But the first thing is find easy wins, because you want to encourage them. Because when you transition staff, that becomes big one. What's going on? What's happening? Am I next? And you can tell them, you're not next. No one's next. And they're like, I'm next. I know what it is. I had people coming to me, I'm like, I How did you think that? You're doing a great job. You're safe. So again, you got to build that in. You got to get people thinking positive, and then start to empower them again. Those people will rise up, and oftentimes we as leaders lack to see the ability of some of our people. And in these challenging times, they rise up and just step out and praise out of them and encourage them and listen to what they say outside words. And I think it becomes self-understanding at that point. And any time I started an organization, I did that. I would meet with as many team members as I could and listen to them and what are priorities. And usually as a new leader, you've got about 90 days to show that you can be successful. And so in that 90-day window, you want to get easy wins, build trust, and build unity in the team. And so the same thing happens when you have these small minor bumps along the way. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
James, anything to add?
For me, we're large, right? A lot of staff, a lot of support there for me. But what was overwhelming for me when I first sat in the seat was like, man, there's so many things to do, and I can be so active during the day. But however, at the end of the day, not much has been accomplished. So what I did is spend a lot of time in prayer, talking with my teammates, talking to other CEOs, and I created this like diagram. I call it, and I put it up. You can't really see it right there, right? But I'll just read it to you. I created like my 4 focus areas, and I have mission alignment. Next to mission alignment, culture, staff wellness and development, healthy teams, presence. One thing I just want to be a presence, as I do have teammates that I can delegate to, so that allows me to be present. Because one of my values is that proximity matters. So mission alignment, board engagement, senior leadership, those that report to me, making sure that I retain them, get their input, develop them as leaders, and hold them accountable.
I'm going to ask the next question just because I know we have some aspiring CEOs in the room, those of you that want to become a CEO of a clinic or something else. So I'd like to ask the panelists to share, is there one thing you know now that you wish you would have known going in? Doesn't have to be specific, like, exam room 6 really was not the right place to do exams, but, something that now with your 1, 2, 3, 4 years in this role, and a couple of you with other roles, people that want to be CEOs, what do they need to know now going in? Let's start with Don.
I guess this experience has taught me this. If you're aspiring to step into this role, one, I said it earlier, it's not about you. And that org chart on the right, so you're looking at your left. So early on in my career, I learned quickly you flip that over. And so you're on the bottom. You're working for every single team member on their team. And if you're not comfortable with the weight of that, because they've got families and they've got kids, think about that. Be prepared for that. And if you can help each and every one around you be successful, you're going to be successful. I would say that the thing I learned the most is be prepared to be flexible and just go to the Lord in prayer on everything. And back to the flexible part. If you come at this from a, quote, business mindset, you're going to struggle. If you come at this strictly from a clinical mindset, you're going to struggle. You've got to be able to engage your CFO, you've got to be able to engage your CMO, you've got to be able to engage your development director, you've got to be able to engage your chief dental officer, you've got to be able to have many hats. And if you're weak in one of those areas, study up, go do some training. If you don't know clinical, go shadow your MAs, go shadow nurses, go shadow a doctor, do what it takes. Because if you can't speak that language, you're going to struggle. In the same sense with the CFO. If you don't get that, get experience. You're going to struggle. And so I guess that would be kind of the quickest thing I learned is just be able to be flexible and be able to be what I'll say is a generalist in all areas. The CEO, that's what you are. You're a generalist. You've got your CMO, who's your specialist, your CFO, your specialist. So they're all your specialists, and you're going to be a generalist. Speak in their language.
James, let's have you go next.
Yeah, I put down this walking humility. It's a humble walk, and like was said, it's about serving others. And the next thing I said, embrace the interruptions. No matter I have my day planned out, but people are always knocking on my door and coming because they're not really coming to check and see how you're doing. They're coming because there's a problem and they want your undivided attention, and that's okay. And that's why you're in the role. I have read the details, read everything. There's this quote that leaders are readers, right? And you just read everything. I think in every contract I'm reading. So another thing that keeps me up at night is reading all of this stuff, just trying to make sure that I'm not the specialist, but I do want to have a working knowledge of it so I can read it.
Just a hint on the embrace the interruptions. It is entirely okay to block yourself 30 or 45 minutes on your calendar and just say reading or something so that you can catch up on what you were going to do at 2, but then someone came into your office with their care, their concern, and you had to help them. So once a day, block time for yourself to do all the stuff that you get distracted from. Nobody typically on the outside, based on how you have your online calendar set up, can see all your details, so you can just block it for something. They don't need to know that that's your embracing the interruption catch-up time. Okay, Jocelyn.
I would say you have to be intentional about developing your leadership skills, which is separate from the X's and O's of doing the job. It's like how you actually lead. That really starts to come out once you get into the seat. And so then when you're able to find good folks to help you develop it, whether that's coaching. My first year, I got a 360 review. I asked for on my 1-year anniversary as CEO, and when I asked for it, I thought, why did you do that? And I did it for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to learn how to take feedback, because from this seat, you get it from everywhere, so you need to learn how to. And then 2, I figured, well, if there's anything I'm really messing up, I want to know when you're in so I can fix it, you know. But what it gave me was the ability to work with somebody on some of my leadership blind spots, and I've really gotten better because I've really focused on that. And then the second thing I would say is it's very important.
Is this on? Oh, yeah. Okay, so what I'd like to do is we take the next couple of questions is pick 2 of our panelists that you'd like to answer. Not that they don't all 4 have great wisdom to share, but we do want to make sure to get through everything. So, striped shirt, yep. Yep, you. Yeah.
So my question is, how do you, or what is like your first team or your support team look like? And if it makes sense, like as I've kind of gone further in leadership, I feel like there's this natural tendency to become somewhat isolated. And honestly, I'm like a team guy. I do not like that. And I'm not sure that that's, I mean, some leaders say that's how it should be. I'm not sure that that's accurate, but so like maybe Jocelyn, you could start, you talked about, you know, this kind of prayer partner you have within your organization.
And so the question is, just to repeat for the recording, is who is your core team that you go to? Who is your support team as a leader? Okay, Jocelyn.
Okay, that is my first course. So my core team, yeah, my CMO, he and I pray together, and that relationship has been amazing for me, and it's just such a great space to work out some issues that you can't tell all around, but you need somebody to talk to. I had an executive coach, and she has been great. She really is somebody who's helped mentor me through some challenges and trying to figure out. I would put Heather in that bucket. She led our search firm, and when I was trying to figure out some more things, she helped me with that. So you actually, what I found is I tend to encounter folks, and there's like kind of a like spirit, and they have an expertise that can kind of shepherd me, because you're shepherding the rest of the organization, and sometimes you need to be able to discuss sensitive issues that you can't run around telling everybody, and also get valuable feedback. There's no point in just shooting breeze. I need folks who can actually help me. So it's built up over the last 3 years. It's been really amazing to watch God send those folks. And so you'll know them when you see them, and it's really been a key part of my development.
Sure, Don.
So we as a leadership team pray every Monday morning. And so people either show up or Zoom in. We do that so we have that. But it is, you do have to isolate yourself. And my go-to is my board executive committee. And I tell them, you are my sounding board. I'm going to come to you with stuff, but I can't come to the rest of you. And it's not fair to come to your team with any of that stuff because that puts them in a compromised situation. You know, your board is your, quote, boss, and so that executive committee on the board should be your go-to. And I tell them that. I'm like, I'm going to come to you with stuff, and some of the sounding board, some of this me venting, I just don't have anyone else to do that, and it's not fair for me to take that home and give my wife. And so I'm being serious, you know, because she can't be against the organization either. And then she's like, you're working too much, you're doing this too much. You know, so it is lonely, but again, you've got to go to your board and say, hey, here's what's up. You've got to step up, and I need to do this for me. So that's how I take it.
And what Don says is critical. So in many communities, and there's no list, you're not going to find them on Google, they're quiet networks, but there are groups of nonprofit CEOs that come together, and there's a code of silence and a safe space, because you cannot complain about your board to your staff. You can't complain about your board chair to your board. Well, some people do, and then we run into problems. But you can't complain about your staff to your board all the time. And you can't complain that, hey, you think you messed up to everybody around you. So you want to find a group. A lot of times they're housed within a United Way, within a nonprofit center. Sometimes I think the church and the clergy have different groups that pull together. Anyone else have one? Is anyone part of something like that where you have a CEO cohort? How did you find it, just quickly?
Our state primary care association has all the FQHC CEOs get together, and so we were having a retreat. There was one woman in particular that I want to get to know her, and we just clicked, and she just become like my sounding board, and she likes charity health in Michigan. So finding another CEO who can walk you through it, she's been there longer. You know, you can even look at you, because I wanted a woman in leadership that I could talk to about that particular challenge too, and so it's really helpful.
Okay. Great. Next question. Yep. You know what? Why don't I pass this around? Then the question doesn't have to be repeated, and we hear it in your words, if that's okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Lyle, and I'm currently a medical student. And I had a question about what degrees or experiences did you have to get to help you in your leadership role? Because I feel in medical school is more so like the medical training, and I need to know what other things I have to do to be able to assume such a role, hopefully in the future. Thank you.
So I think all of you have different degrees. So do you want to just maybe start, James, and work down? Just what training and degrees do you have?
Yeah, I'm a little different. I have
Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I've got to learn all about it. Like I said earlier, you've got to be the generalist, not the specialist. In that, and back to what Daniel was saying, life's going to teach you a ton. You just got to learn from that. You know, and the time you get knocked down, you know, just say, all right, what do I learn from that? And take it as an opportunity to grow. And the final thing, God has uniquely created you. There's no one else in this world who's created like the life experiences you've had, you know, are all in a destiny for you to make an impact on what you can make in this world. And you've got to own that and know that. Ephesians 2:10. And so just hold on to that, and that will take you to where God wants you.
I love this question because one of my former employees is here, Dr. Ott, and he went to Michigan State, and I went to Michigan, and we have an intense rivalry. So I just say, you know, in front of everybody, with him listening, that I have 2 degrees from the University of Michigan, the greatest college of my bachelor's in sociology and a master's in health service administration. And I've seen a lot of people, as you can see from our panel, take the CEO spot from a lot of different degrees. So true, you're uniquely situated, because I often tell folks too, I'm a product of the Flint community school from Flint, Michigan. Things I've learned growing up in Flint and going to the public schools in Flint have helped me greatly as CEO. So it's, amalgamation of your life.
And I would say from the seat that I sit in, and we do executive search and place a lot of CEOs and senior leadership, there isn't a single primary degree. We've placed a physicist as a CEO. We've placed a former restaurateur, entrepreneur as a CEO. We've placed bachelors of sociology, psychology, medical. So there isn't I think as the panelists have said, and I guess I might say by raise of hands, how many of you are doing whatever your first degree was in? How many of you doing that work right now? And how many of you have migrated? Okay, well, about a third of the hands. Right, so you'll evolve as your career evolves over time. So the follow-up question was, would you say it's more so the experiences that you have versus the degree you have?
Yes, my degree is geared towards hospitals, not ambulatory care. So I would say it's been a mix of, yes, I have a base knowledge of healthcare administration, but what I've gotten, in my career, I lean on that way more than my actual coursework from my degrees.
So I'm going to go to this side of the room. I recognize I'm favoring that side of the room. So questions over here. There were hands before. Come on. Okay, yes, question. So please state your question and then maybe which panelist you'd like to direct it to.
Well, first a comment and then a question. So I've had the opportunity to start 2 Christian health centers. My background is primarily in medicine. In partial answer to your question, I would not expect you to learn a whole lot about how to do that through your medical training. I think my recommendation is to follow these folks, get some mentoring in, read some good books. There's a lot of great books out there on principle-centered leadership, et cetera, and just be very humble about it and recognize that when you're working with people, it's a collaborative effort, and your job is often more to be a coach than to be somebody who establishes a specific plan. It just needs to be done with humility and patience and study. There's hard work with that, but we all have good minds that God's given us, and you're going to do okay if that's what God calls you to do. I think one of my great quotes is from a guy named Douglas Wilson. He said, if God calls you to jump through the wall and not leave a hole in it, then your job is to leave the ground. So I think it all depends on what God's calling you, and He'll provide the resources.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, what other questions do we have of the panelists? Okay, there was a hand here somewhere.
I was just interested in knowing, since you started your role as a CEO, if any of you have experienced any sort of imposter syndrome, and how, okay, you're going to answer. And then what resources and tools you've used in addition to prayer and scripture, because I think we all know the scriptures, but just additional tools and resources.
We've probably got time for maybe 3 more questions or so. So who else? We want to be sure to get them all. Okay. I'm still going to defer to this side of the room first to equal it out. Okay.
Mr. Branham mentioned that he's currently filling the CFO and Director of Operations roles. When he said that, I thought, oof, imagine coming into that and then having everyone tell you, oh, well, the CEO, who's your boss, used to do it this way, or just how to make that role, well, for you as a CEO, how do you leave room for people to come in under you and make different decisions that you might make the role their own, while also keeping them from making really bad decisions? I don't know, how do you make room for that, but also, yeah, keep control and make sure that the organization runs well?
Add a little to what Don said, is having those difficult conversations. So in our role of helping boards identify leaders, put leaders in place, typically we're out asking everybody, what do you want in the next leader? And We're working on a specific instance right now, not in your world, so it's a safe example to share. The leader's been there 25 plus years. And when we asked the staff, what do you want? The number one answer, I think like 9 out of 10, was someone who can have difficult conversations. They love this leader. This leader is wonderful, nice, has hired them all, nicest person, buys the best Christmas gifts, but has never given any of them any negative feedback or any helpful feedback to help them grow. And instantly when their leadership team meetings, this would be interesting to hear at your teams, when there's some tension and you can kind of tell they're getting into a good discussion, he ends the meeting. Doesn't want to get there. Doesn't want anyone to feel bad in their workday. Now, he's been there a long, long time, and so it's a different environment, and happy to chat if you're experiencing that in your organization as well. But I would encourage maybe a session for next year that we'll do is follow up is having difficult conversations as the CEO. Because as the CEO, you probably, not every decision you make is popular, is it? I mean, are you getting the popular Boss of the Year award every day? Probably not. But it's a really important aspect of being a leader because your goal is to lead the mission and to lead as the Lord is guiding your clinic forward. It's not to lead to the whims of you and you and you and you every day. You have to make decisions that are moving everybody forward. So having those difficult conversations is probably something when we do coaching and when we're talking with people who want to be leaders, we poke around about can they really address hard topics? So if you don't know how to do that now, practice, and Don, if it's okay, I'll say practice on your spouse, maybe initially, but don't keep doing it. Don't make them your constant sounding board. So, other questions? There was a hand over there before. Okay, yes.
Hi, so I think from the introductions, 2 of our panelists were sort of grown from within the organization and hired from within, and then 2 maybe were brought into new organizations. And I think that there are blessings and curses with both of those situations. And I'd just like to hear from whatever 2 want to respond about, some of the blessings and some of the curses of either being, brought up in the culture that you've known, or coming into an organization where you don't know the culture and just how hard that was.
I'm going to guess all 4 of you have got something to say about that. So let's start with Don and Daniel first, as the 2 leaders came in externally, right? Yeah. Giving me the time's up. And so very quick, one or 2 minutes, James and Jocelyn, and then I'm going to do some quick wrap up so you can all get a break and get to the next session. So James, internal, what were some things that presented both challenge and opportunity being an internal? You were already there.
I think for me, a lot of one-on-one conversations with our leaders, one-on-one, setting expectations. I love the quote, you cannot expect what you have not communicated. You can't expect what you have not communicated. So just, hey, everybody, we know we've been on this journey 10 years together. I'm in a different role now. In this role, this is my expectation.
Yeah, you just have to be very intentional about making the jump. Because I was COO and then moved to CEOC. Probably a couple months into my tenure, I realized I was just a COO sitting in the CEOC. So I had to very intentionally give away those COO tasks and take on the CEOC. And so you have to really make that leap very intentionally during internal management.
Okay. So we are going to say thank you to our 4 panelists, James, Daniel, Don, and Jocelyn. And with extra note of gratitude for their ability to think about it 12 months ago, but act on it in the past 24 hours. So thank you very much from me. And James, I don't even think you've seen the email yet. So he did, he just read the email that, hey, we're doing this today. So you all in the beginning, and those of you that came in, I asked you to text me a picture of your shoes. I'm going to use that in the wrap up here before we post the slide. So if you didn't yet already and you want to text your shoes, show me the shoes that you walk in. If you have any follow-up questions for the presenters, I'll be happy to help facilitate that. I tried to capture down some of the questions, and so we'll put some of those in the follow-up as well. They're all here the next couple days, so I'm sure they'll be happy to chat with you and find time to help you learn and help you continue growing. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers. Okay.